How early should I start training for a marathon? That is definitely a question that I asked myself back in 2002 when I started training for marathons. I actually got a call from the U.S. Army World Class Athlete Program sports specialist who at the time reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to run the New York City Marathon as a part of a charity. And I had no background with marathon running, but how early should I start training for a marathon was a question that I was asking myself because I had recently, at that time, ran the Army 10 miler, which was in October, and November was the 2002 New York City Marathon. It was my first year in the Army as an enlisted soldier, and I had no idea how to run a marathon, but I had the fitness going from the 2002 Army 10 miler. So I had some fitness going into the New York City Marathon. But in most cases, for athletes that are just starting off running the marathon, I think that the proper time frame is a minimum of 12 weeks, but preferably, if you're really going to prepare properly for the marathon distance, you want to give yourself 4 weeks or 4 months to 6 months, and preferably 5 to 6 months. 20 to 24 weeks is the way to go. And I say that because Dr. Joe Vigil, the late Dr. Joe Vigil, he said in his book, Road to the Top, that it does take about 28 days for the body to physiologically adapt to the stress load you're placing on it. So the marathon distance, you want to give yourself more time versus a shorter amount of time as you prepare, because it's such a long race, it's such a complex race, that if you give yourself a longer buildup, you have more time to physiologically adapt to the stresses you're placing on yourself. You know, whether that's tempo runs, it does take, you know, if you're training for a marathon, you want to work your way up to around 10 miles to or 16 kilometers out to around 14 miles in length for your tempo run. Because again, you want to train at your anaerobic threshold for a longer duration versus a shorter duration as you prepare for your marathon. Because again, if you give yourself 5 to 6 months versus say a 12-week buildup, you know, a 3-month buildup or a 4-month buildup, 16 weeks, you're going to be much better prepared and more adapted to that longer duration of running at your anaerobic threshold versus if you're trying to cram all of your training, your marathon training, into say an 8-week block of training or 12 weeks. Yes, runners still can set personal best in a 12-week block of training or even an 8-week block of training. But the goal here is if you're going to do a very short buildup, like a 12-week buildup or an 8-week buildup, make sure you have given yourself 4 to 6 weeks of easy aerobic mileage. You've built that foundation of a marathon aerobic mileage first before you start into an 8-week to 12-week specific marathon block of training. You never just want to jump into marathon training because it's already demanding in and of itself. So I think that runners can still set PRs with shorter 8-week to 12-week buildups. You know, I have 8-week and 12-week training plans on RunDreamAchieve.com if that's something you're interested in. But I always think that, and I always suggest to runners and recommend to runners that if you're really wanting to set a new personal best over the marathon distance and you really want to do it right, look at 16, 20 to 24 weeks. Okay, again, it goes back to what Dr. Vigil said. You know, I mean, he's one of the world's top distance running coaches, a world-renowned exercise physiologist. I mean, he did so many things for the sport, and I was very fortunate to work and be mentored by him as over the years when I was running competitively. And so I do think that in terms of answering the question, how early should I start training for a marathon? The minimum time standard I think is 12 weeks, but really if you want to do it right, give yourself 16 to 24 weeks to allot that sufficient time. Again, it takes time to build that lactate tolerance and to be able to improve your body's lactate tolerance so that you can clear lactic acid effectively as you're racing. And I always talk about too with training for marathon races, if a 3-week taper in the past has not worked best for you and you haven't really gotten the results that you want, consider doing a 10-day taper rather than a 3-week taper. Because a 10-day taper, one, you have plenty of time to really prepare and adapt and recover from the many months of training that you've been putting in for your marathon, 10 days is plenty of time to recover from that. But you don't want to get, and I think a mistake that a lot of runners make, and I've made it too in the past, was as we start dropping our volume and our intensity too far out from our goal race, and we think we're going to go in feeling rested because, again, we've started dropping our intensity, volume, but then we go in and we don't feel very good in the race. And it's anomaly. It's kind of an anomaly because, again, you're trying to perfect all of the specific, not only the specific marathon training that you're doing, and trying to perfect all the components of a marathon, a successful marathon training block. But and then you go in thinking that you're rested, but really you feel flat. You don't feel rejuvenated going into your race. And a common reason for that is because the body gets so locked in to doing a set amount of training each week. And I think switching your marathon training taper phase from 3 weeks to 10 days will continue up until 10 days to remind your body and your legs and what you're training, and your mind of what you're training itself to do, versus getting beyond that set routine that you've been in, and you start dropping all the heavy work you've been doing 3 weeks out. Okay, again, consider doing that if you have not had great success in the marathon distance, and you think that the taper phase of your training may be the reasoning behind that. Consider doing that. But as I answer this question of how early should I start training for a marathon, my advice really, if you really want to get it right, is give yourself 20 to 24 weeks. And that's what I always focused on in my marathon training. I mean, earlier on, I had no real background with marathon training, so I didn't necessarily know the importance of giving yourself more time to adapt to the training you're doing versus, just jumping into these marathons and expecting phenomenal results in a short amount of training. Okay, you don't want to cram all of your fitness into a short block and rush your fitness versus doing it the right way. I mean, the best runners, the best marathon runners that I've trained with over the years, they always were 5 to 6 months. A lot of them at minimum 4 months, 16 weeks. Definitely you can still do some phenomenal training and get in great shape in 16 weeks. But like I said, minimum 16 weeks, 20 to 24 weeks, you're really going to set yourself up for success, because again, you're not in a rush. You're giving yourself more time to adapt to the stresses you're placing on your body, and that's through hill repetitions, VO2 max workouts. And I always recommend one VO2 max workout a week, one long run per week, one tempo run, i.e. anaerobic threshold run a week. You might want to do a tempo run 1 week, which is about 10 seconds slower than running at your anaerobic threshold. The following week, you run at your anaerobic threshold, which is, again, 88 to 92%. It's a little bit more aggressive than running at your tempo pace. So do that. Alternate. 1 week, you do a tempo run. 1 week, the next week, you do an anaerobic threshold run. Okay? Same with the long run. If you're training for the marathon, get beyond running slow and easy every single weekend. It's still important. Don't get me wrong. It's still important to run easy and slow for long periods of time, 18 to 24 miles. But just don't do that every single weekend. If you're wanting to run a faster marathon, you have to get better at handling that goal marathon race pace that you're aiming at. And if you run slow all the time, you're just going to be a superior long, slow distance runner. Your goal is to run faster over the distance, if that's your goal. If your goal is just to start and finish a marathon, then just get in the habit of being very consistent with your volume and get out there every day, whether that's 3 days a week, 2 days a week, and then you build up to 4 to 5 days a week, then that's your goal. If it's to start and finish a marathon, that is still a huge accomplishment for a lot of people. And it's not easy to just start and finish a marathon, but to race a marathon, you have to be more specific, more niche down with your preparation. And so you have to do faster training, just like the Kenyan mindset. They say, train hard, win easy. So it's all, and I always preach this, make training the most difficult part of your preparation, especially when you train for any race. But for the marathon specifically, you want to challenge yourself physically and physiologically and mentally in training. Make that the difficult part. The racing part is the easy part. That's the part where you're celebrating all of your hard work, where you're not so stressed out and overanalyzing your preparation. You do that in training. You don't do that the night before or the day of the race. You've already prepped. You've already done everything you can. Anything your competition's throwing at you, you're going to be able to handle. So I hope this answers the question of how early should I start training for a marathon. I hope it was helpful for you. Feel free to leave me a comment below. Let me know of any questions or concerns, anything that's on your mind as you prepare for your races. Check out the resources below all of my videos, as well as on RunDreamAchieve.com. I guarantee you there are at least a few that will help you set a new personal best in your chosen event. So thank you so much for your support. Thanks for liking it and sharing my videos. And I will talk to you guys and gals all in the next one.